Acknowledgement of country. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and future. I am Nomad. Look out for trivia questions in this video. Where are these Australian records? Where do you find them? Most of what we've shown to you to date has been about Queensland records. There are variances in other state records, but most will show similar details. The presenters for this episode are Nomad, Robbie, Elena, Omar, Gloria, Tina, Margaret, Sebastian and Jeddah. You have all met Nomad, Robbie, Elena and Omar.
We introduce Gloria, who has South Pacific Islander heritage. Her passion is genealogy and she does enjoy a laugh. Tina's ancestry comes from South America. She is the youngest in the team. She enjoys the knowledge gained from other team members. She uses this to understand where she has come from.
Margaret has British ancestry and always has a cuppa at hand when doing her research. She finds it comforting. Sebastian is the outsider of our group who has collected thousands of names in his tree. He is a hard nut to crack in understanding our research methods, but he is getting there, ever so slowly.
Jeddah has an Indigenous background. She is very proud of her heritage. At times, like most of us, what is found can be confronting. She understands that times are changing, but it is still upsetting how reports of her culture have been hidden. It can bring up huge emotional feelings. It is more about the why than anything else that does this.
We all need to remember when doing any kind of research that some of the language used back in that time can be hurtful. As the world begins to change, we hope you will join us on this adventure. It is the small steps that count.
Before we delve deep into each state's records and how to research these, you need to be aware of the restrictions on what records can be viewed. This may cause frustrations as you get into your research.
These restrictions apply to all states. However, there are some differences between each of them. We have listed each state's restriction for your information.
In this table, the numbers represent years. How it works. An example. If you are looking for a marriage certificate in Victoria that occurred in 2005, you are unable to access the record due to these restrictions. Please note, not all jurisdictions have online indexes. You have to remember that each state has a different start date. We will be discussing each state in more detail in the rest of this part and in part 2. You may notice us repeating ourselves frequently as we move through the details.
Before we get into all the details, remember not everything is online.
Australia. As we discussed in our blog in December 2025 titled, Down Under with a Difference. Australia is different in so many ways. The history of the Indigenous population goes back tens of thousands of years, with the arrival of the British in the late 1780s, to the new arrivals more recently. Australia is a multicultural society made up of people from most countries of this world. A lot of Australia's history has been colourful and much not told, from Indigenous culture to slavery from the South Pacific Islands, and then there was the White Australia policy.
One thing to remember about Australia, it was a British penal colony. The British, after being defeated in the Americas, had to find another location to send the prisoners since their jails were overcrowded. Though it is worth noting that there is more to this story.
The reasons why the above is mentioned is so we all get used to knowing more about history to enable us to add context to our ancestor stories. Events locally, nationally, and internationally all have and still do affect us. Within this series, we will discuss and show how this happens. Family history is not just about collecting names, dates, and places.
Gathering information comes from a variety of resources. The National Archives of Australia, situated in Canberra, has a vast array of federal records after the Commonwealth was established in 1901.
My example of using the archives was to research and then visit the archives to see the naturalisation papers of one of my great-great-grandmothers. Seeing the original document which she had completed and signed was an experience to behold.
Family historians from around the world use census records, as they contain large amounts of information about family members. Sadly, Australia destroyed most census records for some reason. Remember, No one gave any thought back then that in the future, family historians would be delving into government documents.
The National Library of Australia is another location to visit online and in person. Again, situated in Canberra. Libraries are extremely useful in locating details to add context to our ancestor stories. Besides these two places, there is also the National Film and Sound Archive of Australia and the National Museum of Australia. Both are situated in Canberra.
One extremely useful resource which can be accessed online is TROVE. Besides accessing local, national, and international newspapers, there are a variety of government gazettes, directories, and almanacs available. When researching these resources, do not dismiss any of these, as you never know what you may find.
To fill gaps in your story and your ancestors, electoral rolls are useful. Note, these can be federal or state. What I have noticed with these records, a lot of the time details are not updated, even though each roll has its own date. As we've said, we will be repeating ourselves regularly.
Other details you may locate covering Australia are military records, including the Australian War Memorial, the Department of Veteran Affairs, trade unions, and even businesses.
In closing the section, it pays to look into various records. You never know what you may find. Of course, you will have done your background research before diving in head first, right?
Each state and territory has their own repositories of records. Again, we mention, not everything is available online. Remember that there are record restrictions as previously mentioned. You are most likely to find research guides for each state and territory on websites that are very useful. It can be difficult to categorize available information, so it is best to know where your event occurred and go to the relevant site to do your research.
We will be listing details for each state and territory. However, be aware the list is not exhaustive. For cemeteries and burials, a good go-to are these two sites. Find a Grave It's Free and Billion Graves. Note, they have a free plan but also offer plans at a price in US dollars per month.
Australian Capital Territory, ACT. We will commence with the Australian Capital Territory. The nation's capital is found here, Canberra. You will find a vast number of records available. Please check out the site at your leisure. We will not be delving into these here. We know everyone will have different requirements. You may also be interested in the Family History, ACT, and the Canberra and District Historical Society, as both have good resources. Please watch out for rabbit holes.
New South Wales NSW. The best place to commence your research in New South Wales is the State Archives. The archives have some excellent guides worth checking out before diving in. New South Wales was the first state of Australia. At the beginning of the British arrival in 1788, it covered a vast area of the country.
As you can imagine, the archives have a large number of records, too many to mention here. We suggest you investigate the archives to find out what is available online. Records are being added regularly, so always check back later.
The oldest cemetery in Australia is St. John's Cemetery in Parramatta.
If you have early settlers arriving after 1867 in Sydney, you may find the Rockwood Cemetery of interest. It may also be an interesting cemetery to visit. Please note, it is still a working cemetery. The Society of Australian Genealogists, SAG, has an excellent archive catalogue.
New South Wales civil registrations began in March 1856. Births, deaths, and marriages for New South Wales website is displayed on screen. You can search the free online indexes, which may include some earlier church records. Note, to obtain copies of the records there is a cost. For current details, check the site. You may also wish to use transcription agents who are cheaper. We have used them to obtain a death certificate. Do your research to begin with as the best approach.
Other resources worth checking out are electoral rolls, government gazettes via TROVE, immigration records, maps, and of course libraries. Just remember, not everything is online.
Northern Territory NT. For your ancestors born in the Northern Territory, check out the Library and Archives website. Please have a look around the site. you can use the online search tools. Also, civil registrations began in 1870. Be aware there are no online indexes. You can research historical records in person, but there is a search fee. Further details are mentioned on their website.
Other useful records are electoral rolls, libraries, and the Northern Territory Genealogical Society.
This brings us to the end of the session. We will be continuing the Australian records for the following states in 2 weeks' time, where we will cover Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania, Victoria, and Western Australia.
As you can see, there is a vast amount of information relating to researching records. All the links have been checked and updated where necessary. Accessed 24 March 2026. You may find that once you start looking into the different websites that hours will pass quickly. You need to remember, when you begin your research, to always commence with a research question. If you find something else of interest, make a note and go back to it later. You will be hearing a lot more about rabbit holes, and we will be explaining these further in a future episode. Have fun, and see you in part 2 in 2 weeks' time. Enjoy the adventure. With all of us here, we would be delighted for you to join our family. I am sure you know the drill. Click like, subscribe, and of course, please make a comment.